Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Wright. I'm the UK Managing Director at Ørsted, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to our East Coast Operations Hub here in Grimsby. A little about the facility that we're in. This is the warehouse of our expanded operations base, which is now the largest dedicated offshore wind facility in the world. And that's appropriate because about 75 miles off the coast in broadly that direction, Ørsted is also building the world's largest offshore wind farms. Indeed, we achieved first power at the giant Hornsea 1 offshore wind farm just last month. And once that's complete next year, we'll build Hornsea 2, which is even bigger. And together, these projects will provide enough electricity to power 2.5 million UK homes. The £10 million investment in this building and the tens of billions of pounds of investment that's taking place in the waters around our coastline has been made possible by successive government support for offshore wind. This support has been rewarded by an industry that has dramatically reduced costs, such that offshore wind projects today are now competitive with conventional fossil fuel generation. This journey culminated just yesterday in the completion of a sector deal between government and the industry to deliver up to a third of the UK's energy needs by 2030. This marks the coming of age of offshore wind sector in the UK, and it ticks the boxes of an industrial strategy for two main reasons. The first, it can provide cost-effective, low-carbon electricity at massive scale to help achieve our Climate Change Act targets, while keeping costs down for customers. And two, and as importantly, it can create jobs and economic prosperity for UK businesses as this technology expands in domestic and international markets. Nowhere is this better represented than right here in the Humber, where this facility will employ over 400 people in highly skilled, long-term jobs by the early 2020s. And just across the river in Hull, over 1,000 local people are already employed making the 75-metre long blades for our turbines. This is clean growth and industrial strategy in action, and we are privileged to be a part of this community to transform it to a brighter, greener and more prosperous future. Now, my other duty this afternoon is to introduce our very special guest, who has generously spent time visiting our facility, meeting some of our fantastic employees, and learning about our story so far and our future plans. Please welcome Prime Minister Theresa May.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for that introduction, and thank you to Ørsted for hosting us today. And your work in offshore wind, as we've just heard, does not just provide skilled jobs here in Grimsby. It makes a direct contribution to the UK's efforts to reduce our carbon emissions and protect our environment. Achieving the economic benefits of the global shift to sustainable green growth is one of the four grand challenges in our modern industrial strategy. And the UK is the world leader in offshore wind. Yesterday, as you've also just heard, we launched our offshore wind sector deal to build on that success. And as an international company investing in the UK, Ørsted is making a major contribution to that success, and I'm delighted to be with you today. Next week, members of Parliament in Westminster face a crucial choice: whether to back the Brexit deal or to reject it. Back it, and the UK will leave the European Union. Reject it, and no one knows what will happen. We may not leave the EU for many months. We may leave without the protections that the deal provides. We may never leave at all. The only certainty would be ongoing uncertainty. Months more spent arguing about Brexit when we could be focusing on improving our NHS, our schools and our communities. It will be for the 630-odd MPs at Westminster who will be voting next week to take this decision. But they will take it on your behalf, and on behalf of tens of millions of people across the UK. Parliament gave the decision to leave or remain in the European Union to you. 33.5 million people took part in the referendum, the biggest turnout for a generation. The result was close, but it was clear. If it had gone the other way, we would be staying in. But the decision was to leave, and that is what we must do. Now, as Prime Minister, my job has been to negotiate the very best deal I could. I believe that's precisely what the government has done, working with the EU team led by Michel Barnier. Discussions have at times been difficult and robust, but we've both worked in a spirit of mutual respect and cooperation to get a good deal over the line. Now, I've made a lot of speeches about that deal over the last few months. Most of them have been in the House of Commons. On Tuesday, I'll be making another one when I open the debate ahead of the vote. But Brexit does not belong to MPs in Parliament. It belongs to the whole country. It belongs to the people who voted for it and want to see it implemented so we can all move on to a prosperous future. And that more prosperous future also belongs to those who voted against Brexit and who expect politicians to make reasonable compromises to bring our country back together. Everyone now wants to get it done. Move beyond the arguments, past the bitterness of the debate, and out of the EU as a united country ready to make a success of the future. And that's why I've come here to speak to you today, to explain why this debate is dragging on and what is at stake. Because it was in places like Grimsby that the referendum was decided and where what is at stake can be seen most clearly of all. People here in North East Lincolnshire voted decisively to leave the European Union in 2016 by a ratio of 7-3. Everyone had their own reasons for voting. But having spent much of the past 3 years talking to people about Brexit, about their hopes, their aspirations, and their fears too, some common themes emerge. People wanted more control over the things that matter to them. The Brexit deal before Parliament gives them that control. Today, vast amounts of taxpayers' money is paid to the EU. In 2017, we made a net contribution of over £8.9 billion. The deal stops that. Instead, we will spend our money on our own priorities, like our long-term plan for our precious NHS. Today, immigration between the UK and the EU is defined by free movement. People can move from one EU country to another without a job offer. They make a big contribution to our economy, our public services, and our society. But it means our government does not have control of how many people move to Britain every year. The deal I've negotiated ends free movement and takes back control of our borders. We can then create an immigration system built around people's skills, not the country they come from. Today, the European Court of Justice has jurisdiction in the United Kingdom. The deal will end that. We will make our own laws, and British judges will determine how they are applied. Today, the terms of our international trade are decided by the EU. We cannot negotiate trade deals with other countries around the world. The EU does that on our behalf. The deal means we will take back control of our trade policy in our own interests. Many of our farmers feel that the common agricultural policy does not work for them. Many in fishing communities feel the same about the common fisheries policy. The deal takes us out of the CAP so we can design our own support for farmers. The deal takes us out of the CFP, restoring full sovereign control of our waters, the biggest opportunity for our fishing industry for over 40 years. These are the changes people voted for. They were my priorities in the negotiations, and they are what the deal delivers. But when people voted in the referendum, it was not just about our relationship with the EU. It was about much more than that. It was also a vote for real change in our own country. And it was a message to those in positions of power that for too many people working hard up and down the country, life was too hard. It expressed a desire for positive change, not just to take back control from Brussels, but to empower communities here in the UK, to create greater opportunity for the next generation. And Grimsby is a place determined to build that better future. Like many towns, it has its share of challenges, but it also has huge potential. And last year, it became the first town in the UK to sign a town deal. And I want to congratulate everyone who worked so hard to land the deal, including both local MPs, Melanie Onn for Great Grimsby and Martin Vickers for Cleethorpes. The deal represents a collaboration between local and central government, businesses and the wider community. It sets as its goal making the most of Grimsby's assets. The UK's busiest port by tonnage, ready to expand its operation after we leave the EU and strike new trade deals. Its location on the Humber Energy Estuary, ideally placed to consolidate its position of one of Europe's leading centres for offshore wind, with firms like Ørsted making a major contribution. And its maritime and fishing heritage, central both to Grimsby's identity and its future. The deal is a model for other towns to follow, and it has inspired the new £1.6 billion Stronger Towns Fund that we launched this week. That fund stands alongside the other support we're giving to local areas, over £9 billion of local growth funds, £3.4 billion for the Northern Powerhouse, £1.6 billion for the Midlands Engine, as a key part of our wider modern industrial strategy. The central aim of that strategy is to ensure that good jobs of the future are available in every community. We are lucky as a country to have in London one of the world's greatest cities. But it's no good all the growth in our economy and the opportunities that growth brings being concentrated in London and the South East. We need an economy that works for everyone, a country where everyone can be proud of their community and every community offers people the opportunity to get on in life. That is the opportunity that awaits our country if we agree the Brexit deal. We can build the stronger communities that must be the real legacy of the vote to leave. So the deal delivers on the priorities of those who voted to leave. It also addresses the concerns of those who voted to remain. By maintaining the close relationship between our police and security agencies, the deal means we can carry on working with our EU allies to keep people safe. By reflecting the interests and serving the needs of Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland and England, the deal will keep our precious union of 4 proud nations strong and united. And maintaining that strength is crucial. More than ever before, we live in an interconnected world, one in which every country is affected by the decisions of its neighbours and partners across the globe. That will not change after we leave the EU. And neither will the values that guide our actions as a responsible actor on the world stage. We will be a strong voice on the UN Security Council and in NATO, the Commonwealth and the World Trade Organization. We will be a leading military power, meeting our obligations to uphold global security. And we will keep our promises to the world's poorest people, not just because it is the right thing to do, but because it is in our national interest. The deal also safeguards the protections that EU membership currently gives us and which people rightly value. That starts with the rights of all those from the EU who have moved here, contributed to our country and built their lives in the UK. We've also committed to protecting the rights and standards currently set at the EU level, from workers' rights to environmental protections. Brexit will not be a race to the bottom. In fact, in most of these areas, the UK has led the way ahead of the EU. And this week we have said that if the EU expands workers' rights, we will debate those measures in Parliament and decide if we want to follow suit. And our ongoing commitment will start with the 2 directives that will come into force after we've left and which the UK supports. But we will not tie ourselves in automatically to follow EU changes without Parliament having its say. That would mean weakening workers' rights if the EU ever chose to do so, and it would not be taking back control. The UK has led the way in the EU, and we will lead the way outside it. Leaving with the deal means workers' rights will be protected, and if they back the Brexit deal on Tuesday, MPs will give our whole economy a boost. In spite of the unavoidable uncertainty of the Brexit process, our economy continues to do well, thanks to its underlying strengths. The employment rate is at a record high. The unemployment rate is at a 40-year low. Borrowing this year is at a 17-year low, and debt is falling. Just imagine how much more we could achieve with the certainty of a deal. Our energy would be focused on building our future relationship, forging new trade deals with the rest of the world, and tackling the other issues that matter to people. Businesses will invest and create more jobs. Money that would be spent guarding against the economic shock of a no-deal exit could be put to better use on the services people need and on growing our economy. And the UK would send a message around the world, a giant open for business sign to investors. The democratic case for backing the deal is clear, and so is the economic case. It not only removes the risk of a no-deal exit, it allows us to reap the enormous benefits of leaving with a deal. I've set out why I believe MPs should back the deal next week. It takes back control of the issues people care about, it delivers the change that communities voted for, it protects the things we value, and it sets us on course for a prosperous future. Next week, Parliament will make its choice. In January, MPs said no to the deal for a variety of reasons. Some wanted to stop Brexit altogether. Jeremy Corbyn opposed it because he wanted a general election and said he would vote against the deal without even reading it. But others voted against it because they had genuine concerns and they felt there was time for the government to get changes to address them. And the biggest concern was about the so-called Northern Ireland backstop. The backstop's an insurance policy. It's there to guarantee that if we run out of time to agree our new relationship with the EU during the next phase of the negotiations, it will not lead to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Like any insurance policy, no side ever wants to use it. It's part of the deal that the backstop cannot be permanent. And it's not in the EU's interest for it to be permanent, because they fear this would give us a competitive advantage in the long term. But there are genuine concerns that there's no clear way out of the backstop if the future negotiations break down. I've taken those concerns to Brussels, I've explained them to every single EU leader, and we've put forward serious, detailed proposals to address them. The government is in discussions with the EU right now, focused on getting the legal changes MPs have asked for. As I've said before, this will not in any way alter our enduring commitment to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and to avoiding a hard border in all circumstances. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement was a landmark achievement for the UK government, the Irish government, and the political parties in Northern Ireland. It brought peace to our country after many years of tragedy. The people of Northern Ireland are our people, and their security and well-being is our security and well-being. But just as MPs will face a big choice next week, the EU has to make a choice too. We're both participants in this process. It is in the European interest for the UK to leave with a deal. We're working with them, but the decisions that the European Union makes over the next few days will have a big impact on the outcome of the vote. European leaders tell me they worry that time is running out and that we only have one chance to get it right. My message to them is now is the moment for us to act. We've worked hard together over 2 years on the deal. It's a comprehensive deal that provides for an orderly exit from the EU and that sets a platform for an ambitious future relationship. It needs just one more push to address the final specific concerns of our Parliament. So let's not hold back. Let's do what is necessary for MPs to back the deal on Tuesday. Because if MPs reject the deal, nothing is certain. It would be at a moment of crisis. MPs would immediately be faced with another choice. Either we leave the EU with no deal on the 29th of March, I don't believe that would be the best outcome for the UK or the EU, or we delay Brexit and carry on arguing about it, both amongst ourselves and with the EU. And that's not in our interests either. More talking will not change the questions that need to be settled, and a delay risks creating new problems. If we were simply asking for a bit more time to pass the legislation we need to implement Brexit once we've agreed the deal, a delay would be straightforward. But if it were a delay to give MPs even more time to decide what we're going to do, the EU might insist on new conditions that were not in our interest before they agreed to such an extension. And that might lead to a form of Brexit that does not match up to what people voted for. It could mean no end to free movement, no ability to strike our own trade deals, no end to the big annual payments, no taking back control, which is what the British people voted for. And a delay could lead to something else, a second Brexit referendum. The chances of that have increased since Jeremy Corbyn said he would back one. And it's become clear to me that Jeremy Corbyn isn't really interested in finding a solution. Since we met to discuss a way forward for our country on the 30th of January, I've repeatedly offered him another meeting to follow it up. In return, after multiple requests from my office, he's offered just 1 hour over the last 5 weeks when our teams could meet. And we now know why. Because despite his promise at the last election to deliver Brexit, he now supports holding a divisive second referendum that would take the UK right back to square one. Not completing Brexit and getting on with all the other important issues people care about, just yet more months and years arguing. If we go down that road, we might never leave the EU at all. And that would be a political failure. It would let down the more than 17 million people who voted to leave the EU and do profound damage to their faith in our democracy. Some of the people who voted in the referendum did so for the first time in years. Why should they ever bother doing so again if their decision were overturned without ever being implemented? My message to those MPs who agree with me that we should not risk that is simple. The only certain way to avoid it is to back the deal the government has secured with the EU on Tuesday. Let's get it done. MPs face a historic choice next week. I'm ready to take us out of the EU with a deal that is good for the UK. Ready to implement the decision of voters here in Grimsby and across the UK. And ready to get on with making a success of a new chapter for our country. But I can only do that if Parliament supports the deal on Tuesday. I need the support of those who, like me, voted Remain, but believe in honouring the result and believe that leaving with a good deal is much better than leaving with no deal. And I need the support of those who voted to leave, but who accept that compromise is necessary if we are to bring our country back together. There may be some on both sides who are not prepared to back a negotiated deal with the EU. Some because they cannot accept leaving the EU at all, others because they cannot accept any compromise on their vision of Brexit. I don't doubt the sincerity of their views, but I profoundly disagree with them. Ironically, both sides would find themselves in the same lobby come the vote next week, each voting the same way, but each hoping for the opposite result. I hope that they will be in the minority. The British people have already moved on. They're ready for this to be settled. By coming together as a parliament, we can bring our country together, boost our economy, safeguard our security, protect a union, and take a decisive step toward the bright future that the British people voted for and which you and our whole country deserve. So let's get it done. Thank you. So I'll just take a few questions from the media. Beth?
I'll use this one. Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, you just said that if your deal is voted down next week, you may never leave the EU at all. Is no deal Brexit now no longer your government policy? Are you still planning to whip MPs to vote for no deal next week if they reject your plan?
Well, government policy has always been that the best thing for the UK is to leave with a negotiated deal. And my focus is on the vote on Tuesday, which is going to be the vote for that deal. Obviously, as I say, we're still in some discussions with the European Union on the specific issue on the backstop that Parliament raised. But what I want people to do is to focus on that vote on Tuesday. Voting for that deal enables us to leave the EU, to do it in a smooth and orderly way, and I think that's the best route for the UK. Is Peter Walker? Yes.
Thank you very much. Peter Walker from the Guardian. Prime Minister, in your speech, you seem to put some of the blame for the delays to Brexit down to Jeremy Corbyn, to the EU and to MPs in Parliament. But we're now at a position where we're 4 days away from a second crucial vote. and MPs still don't know necessarily what they're going to vote on. And also, we're 3 weeks away from Brexit, and the workers here in this room don't know if we're going to leave on March the 29th. They don't know we're going to leave with no deal, leave with your deal, or leave with a different deal. How much of any personal responsibility do you take for this kind of chaos?
First of all, we have been, as a government, negotiating with the European Union for a deal that enables us to have a smooth and orderly exit from the EU. That we triggered Article 50, the 2 years ends on the 29th of March. Obviously, Parliament rejected the deal that I brought back. Parliament needs to support the deal, to ratify the treaty that lies behind that deal. What I'm saying, you mentioned the next few weeks, but actually what I'm saying is now is the moment for us to get this done. Now is the moment for Parliament to come together, to back the deal and to deliver what people voted for. We have a responsibility to deliver to the people of this country the Brexit they voted for, and that's what the deal is about. John Pienaar?
John Pienaar, BBC News. Prime Minister, are you simply keen to shift the blame for the way the talks have deadlocked towards the European Union and away from yourself? And if I may, are you willing to contemplate allowing Conservative colleagues, including ministers, to vote to block a no-deal Brexit, given you said it could harm Britain and the British people?
As I've just said in response to the previous question, my focus is on the deal debate that will take place on Tuesday and getting that vote through. That vote would enable us to leave with a deal. And for those who don't want us to leave without a deal, actually the best way is to vote for the deal so that we leave with that deal. You said about the relationship with the European Union. Now, this is my message to the European Union is very clear. Some of the leaders and some in the European Union, when I've talked to them, have said that they're not really sure whether this is the moment, whether this is the time, whether there's some more time to be talking about this and negotiating on this. My message is, this is the moment. This is the time. You know, I think the British public, as I say, have moved on. They want us to get this done. It takes both sides to get that negotiation through and then bring that deal back to the Parliament on Tuesday. But I think what people want is for us just to do this and to do it now. Do I see Rob Hutton?
Rob Hutton from Bloomberg. Prime Minister, I mean, the ship has sailed on a smooth and orderly Brexit some time ago. There are, in fact, ships sailing around the world now that don't know what customs regime they're arriving in. We're already in chaos. There are already business leaders tearing their hair out over the mess that they're in. Do you think that you owe them an apology? And do you think that you owe it to them? We all understand why it is that you don't want to talk about what happens after Tuesday, but real people with real lives, with real important decisions, need to make decisions. They need to know, assuming this doesn't go through on Tuesday, what happens then. Are you going to take no deal off the table, or are you going to sort of continue this Tory psychodrama?
Well, can I say, Rob, I mean, I think this is the third time I will have answered this question. Look, the thing for everybody to focus on, I think that the best thing that we can do, individual members of Parliament can do on Tuesday, when we're looking at the issues that you raise. You talked about businesses, about the ships that have already sailed, already sailing to be received in ports where they're not sure what the arrangements would be for the future. The best thing that individual members of Parliament can do in that circumstance is vote to end that uncertainty. Vote to end that uncertainty by voting for the deal. Then we do have the smooth and orderly Brexit that is possible. If MPs don't vote for that deal, what we know is that the uncertain thing we know is that we will see ongoing uncertainty. We can bring certainty to those businesses by voting for the deal on Tuesday. And I see Jack from the Telegraph.
Thank you. Jack Maidment from the Daily Telegraph. Prime Minister, is it still possible for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union on March 29th, or is a delay of some form now inevitable given the amount of work that Parliament must do to prepare for our departure? Thank you.
Well, the first thing, if MPs vote for the deal on Tuesday, then what happens is, as you know, the usual channels, there are processes in Parliament, get together and work out how they can take through the necessary legislation. And that would happen when a vote goes through on Tuesday. And the last one I'll take from Patrick from the Grimsby Telegraph.
Hello, Patrick Daly from the Grimsby Telegraph. Prime Minister, this week you've laid out your sector deal for the offshore wind sector, and you've also made the concession on workers' rights. I wondered how much of this week was orientated towards this Grimsby visit and persuading both the town, the constituency MP Melanie On, and other like-minded Labour MPs in Leave voting constituencies to back your deal next week.
Well, first of all, a number of MPs across the House have raised the issue of workers' rights and their concern about what would happen in the future. We've been talking to them about the right approach to take, and I believe that it is absolutely right, as we say, that as the EU moves in future on workers' rights, then Parliament will have an opportunity to look at those and to say whether the UK should follow those changes in rights. But it shouldn't be automatic, because if the EU were to reduce workers' rights, then we would find ourselves having to do that. So I think it's important that Parliament makes those decisions. And don't forget, there are a number of areas where rights here in the UK are actually already in advance and better than those that are provided for from the European Union. You mentioned the sector deal. The Energy Minister, Claire Perry, is here. She was involved in that, as were individuals here from Ørsted. And this is something that hasn't just happened this week. It may have culminated this week, but I can assure you it's been, I think, 2 years in the making sure that we get this right. But it's hugely important for an area like this. As I say, we are now a world leader in offshore wind. And offshore wind is bringing high-skilled jobs here and to other parts of the United Kingdom. There are real opportunities. What we're aiming for, that ensuring that a third of our energy generation is generated by offshore wind by 2030, is enormous. That means significant increases in jobs, high-skilled jobs here in the UK. It's good for the UK and it's good for Grimsby. Thank you.